Assalamu alaikum, good afternoon, and welcome to this afternoon's program of Talking Point. I'm your host, as usual, Syed Niaz Ahmed. In the studios today, we have on our right Ms. Helen Ullah, and on our left is Dr. Danish Khan. Dr. Danish Khan is President of Indian Journalists Association, and might I use this opportunity to congratulate him. He has recently completed his PhD at Oxford University. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you so much.
How are you?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well, we have a lot on our plate today, but first things first, I'll go to Helen Ullah, and I will ask her to introduce herself because she is here for the first time today.
Thank you for inviting me to the show. As I said, my name is Ms. Helen Ullah. I sort of specialize in financial services sector as a regulatory reporting individual.
And you're based in London?
Yes, I'm based in the UK.
Great. As I said that we have a lot on our plate today, but first things first, we are all from Bangladesh here, and except Dr. Danish is originally Indian, and we are all originally Indian from the Indian subcontinent that way. Bangladesh has gone through recently a kind of an overhaul of things. There have been turmoil, there have been protestations, there have been violence, and there has been a change in government. Now, people have been observing this with different views, using different periscope, different eyeglasses, and different views. We'll discuss all the possible views, but let me quote something that was written by Michael Kugelman. He's the director of South Asia Institute at Wilson Center. It's very clear that you had a mass movement that got larger and angrier and violent. What had been a peaceful protest became something very different. When security forces cracked down hard on protesters, it became clear that she, and here it means the then Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, was losing grip and support. Then she resigned and left. When suddenly a government resigns, the Prime Minister leaves, then there will be a turmoil, a vacuum. And to fill that vacuum, Bangladeshi authorities, quote unquote, appointed an interim government, interim set of advisors, and now they are looking after the things, you see. But how much can they do, can they achieve in this shortest span of time, we do not know. But we are going to have an opportunity to discuss these aspects. So, Dr. Khan, in your view, this interim government, though it doesn't have the backing of the public as such, through they don't have a mandate as in election, but that's another story that we can discuss about elections and the mandate. Dr. Yunus does not have the public mandate, but he has the popular support of the forces that brought him on, particularly the students, you see. Do you think that this interim advisory committee, and it's ever increasing, it has started from 7 to 11 to 18 to now probably in excess of 20. Obviously they will need more than that to administer a country of this size and the problems that are besetting this young nation. Now, do you think that Dr. Yunus and his team can really handle this situation at this very critical moment?
Well, Dr. Yunus is not a politician, and we all know that. He is a political novice, so to say. But as you rightly pointed out, that there is a vacuum, and that vacuum needs to be filled. And we must also remember that the circumstances in which that vacuum arose is not something which gave a very good picture of Bangladesh. It was turmoil, it was violence, it was hatred. So having someone who has won the Nobel Prize, has done work in Bangladesh himself, is fairly well known in the circles, in the elite circles of different parts of the world, kind of gives a little bit of legitimacy and confidence, I will say. Whether that translates into something fantastic, only time will tell. But as a first step, I think the installation of Muhammad Yunus is a good step, is a good sign, because there will be expectations, and in some way it also gives this feeling that they have appointed someone who is apolitical, in a sense that he was not into politics, but will work for the betterment. So hopefully we can only hope that he takes things forward in a much designed, much defined, well-defined way, and of course steers the economy, takes care of the external relations, brings stability, and then of course opens the door for a free and fair election and a popular government to come back.
That's right. And also because he is known the world over as somebody who understands finance, see. And right now Bangladesh is suffering from financial problems, and there are allegations of this corruption and that corruption, and disappearance of funds from this bank or that bank. So possibly he, with his knowledge of finance and banking, possibly he could be the right person to set the things right.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, our other guest is also from the banking world. And what is your opinion that a person like Dr. Yunus can set that ball rolling as well as achieve targets, particularly in the financial field?
Well, in any organisation, there obviously has to be a form of transparency, governance and accountability. So any financial institution, you're accountable for any transactions. So you always have like an audit or risk committee, a treasury committee. You have non-executive directors who can steer. So with his sort of knowledge, he would have to sort of apply from a grassroots level, because he was the one who sort of implemented the Grameen Bank, which was a microfinance credit institution, to help alleviate poverty, and that has been quite successful. So bearing on his knowledge, what he's sort of developed over time, he can use that information and knowledge to sort of see what does the current population, citizens, do they want. So it's more like his sort of knowledge is more entrepreneurial level, and this is what has been grossly lacking within the population, within the Bangladesh, where people wanted to be entrepreneurs. They didn't have access to immediate like funds or sets, because obviously it was controlled by a bureaucratic sort of policy. So
going back to again protestations, and Bangladeshi students protesters are celebrating victory in the so-called revolution. They call it revolution because they have changed the government, they have changed the overall look of the circumstances. After just 1 month, over a month, they managed to topple Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, who critics say has ruled the country with an iron fist, see, for the past 15 years. Abrupt exit was on 5th of August. Initial reaction was repression and police violence, typical of her autocratic rule. Now, with she gone, not very far away, she gone, now there is no, the party is not there, the opposition party is not there, her ministers are not there. So Dr. Yunus and the interim committee of the caretaker government, if we call them, they have a free hand. There is no opposition as such. It's normally in any country when the government always has, like we have here, Her Majesty's opposition. They don't have any opposition. And not that Sheikh Hasina had real opposition as such, see, but this particular Dr. Yunus's committee has no opposition at all. So there should not be any problem in implementing whatever they want with popular schemes, right?
Yes, I mean, but still you need to have like a strategy. You have to have a vision and a goal. What is your vision? What do we see within the interim? time, within a 3-month period, 6-month period, 1 year, 5-year strategy. What do we want to see in a 5-year period? How do we get to that goal vision? These should be like a documentation, accountability, transparency, which is the most important thing, and governance over these certain issues. Accountability, okay, if we want to achieve a certain milestone, what's the counter effect on that?
Right.
So from a financial point of view, say, there has, now that the financial governance scheme within the banks are in disarray, how do we sort of, what's the strategy going forward? How can we implement it, making sure that certain risk controls are implemented in processes, which happens in the UK. Every bank, whether it's a small bank, whether it's a multinational investment bank, there's risk and controls, there's committees, there's accountability and transparency and governance.
With most of the banks, they were not running according to the rules.
Exactly.
And there was flight of capital, left, right, and center, and that has to be checked. Do you think it will be possible for the interim government to make it possible to bring the huge amount of funds that have been siphoned off, to bring it back? Will they have the authority, will they have the desire, and will they have the time to do that?
I think they would have to sort of consult with the international sort of money laundering team, put their sort of proposals forward, and sort of go through the courts to be able to locate where these funds are. Because, as I said, in the UK, every bank has a money laundering sort of department. Even if it's a simple transaction, as a UK citizen who conducts a transaction in a UK bank, you're accountable for it. They'll ask you a question: what is this money, where it's going? So I think they would have to sort of go through the course. I'm sure they can if they put the proposal forward. And
where this money is going, that's all right, you see. But do they also ask questions where this money has come from?
Yeah, there will be an audit trail to say, okay, where is the origin of the money? Where has it gone for the next position?
So how is it that there are allegations, assumptions that billions of dollars have been siphoned off Bangladeshi bank to foreign companies or offshore companies, places, businesses, banks? So how does it happen?
Well, they will have to go, as I said, through the courts with the international money laundering investigation team, ask governments for the respective countries to sort of, they would have to sort of provide the information of certain personnel. But I feel that with the money laundering, these funds have been transferred directly in individuals' names, because it would be transparent. You would have to set up like fictitious companies to sort of
offshore companies.
Yes, offshore companies, or companies that, what's the function of this company. So this is where it's important that most countries have strict rules. So let's say in the UK, it would be strict rule, okay, this company is set up, who's the shareholders, what's the directors, where is the money coming from, what's the number of shares, how many shares do they hold, their passports, identification. And now increasingly that has become more transparent now with the Companies Act recently, where you submit certain returns, you actually have to give your passport and your photo, which wasn't previously before. So because of money laundering, which is becoming a major issue internationally.
Right, sir. Ma'am. The protesters in Bangladesh, they are celebrating the victory in the revolution. So, do you think that this is too premature to celebrate the victory, or they have just changed the government?
Well, yeah, to begin with, I mean, it is a revolution, because by the very fact that the government is gone, someone who was there for such a long time is no more holding the reins of power. So it is nothing short of a revolution by that parameter. Yes, absolutely. Whether it's too early, well, I think people at the moment in Bangladesh, from what I gather, are relieved, are happy, because that's what they wanted. at least a vast majority, especially the students and the youngsters, and they've managed to get that. But I just want to comment a bit where you also asked about what the interim government has no opposition. Well, actually in that way they will also be very minutely watched, because remember, Hasina was powerful, Hasina was popular as well, you cannot deny that. Of course she had this authoritarian streak which we all saw, it was on display, and then she faced what she faced. I have a feeling that the interim government will of course have that at the back of their mind, that if they don't perform, you'll perish. So long-term view is very important, as our fellow panelists were saying, very rightly so, that there has to be a strategy, there has to be a properly defined goals, which is what they have to meet and what steps are they taking. If they are seen as people who are not performing, who are just enjoying the office of power without delivering, then of course they might also not be in a very comfortable position. But yeah, to begin with, the installation of Yunus is a good sign. As I said, he has a good reputation worldwide. Of course, the Grameen Bank model is there, so he is a person who has done things on ground. How does that translate while running a government? Only time will tell. But people are correct to celebrate, because they wanted the regime to go, and she has gone.
So that way the revolution is...
That way the revolution is definitely taken place, and it is successful. So yeah.
Well, that is, a lot of people ask this question, you see, that after just 1 month, you see, how is it that unarmed, sort of not controlled protestation, it delivered what they wanted, you see.
Yes, absolutely. You're right.
And it was not just in Dhaka, but all over the country, in the face of the internet darkness, if you remember. The internet was, Bangladesh didn't have internet facilities for 5 days, see, and which was considered very, something very unusual, and it also harmed the image, one thing. Secondly, it harmed the business and the banking sector, because...
Yes, of course. I mean, it does take a toll, because when people see these images of mobs rampaging on the streets, and those images are beamed across the world, they send a very negative signal to the international community, to the businesses, to multilateral agencies and capital cities around the world. But it was all boiling over, perhaps. So even though, as you said, the internet was not there for some time, the anger was there, and people were connected and united in this resolve that we need to throw this particular regime away. And I think that's what got translated into streets. So it was the power of social media. It might not be working at that particular moment, but over the last few weeks, months, years, people have been sharing and talking about what wrongs the governments have done and how we can counter it. And that's what happened. I mean, no one saw the writing on the wall, perhaps. I mean, accounts now suggest that Hasina was not even ready to leave the residence. She was prevailed upon by the army chief, saying that I cannot guarantee your safety. So it just shows the disconnect by the ruling class with what's happening on the street. And I think this is a very good illustration of how that knowledge gap can translate into the ouster of a popular leader.
Right. So she had to leave because the popularity was gone. She was disconnected. And the army chief said that we cannot protect you because okay. All right. Now the real culprit in the quota system. This had triggered the whole movement. What was quota system? The quota system was it was reinstated by High Court, and the idea was to grant more jobs to the descendants of people who fought the freedom war, Mukti Juddha. But the meritocracy was ignored, and less than half of the people who got the job on the basis of their merit will be not accommodated in all kinds of jobs, but only certain kinds of jobs. It was also seen as a kind of favor to the supporters of a particular party. 1/3 was reserved for the relatives of the Mukti Juddha. It was previously scrapped in 2018, but in 2024 again it was brought back. Now that country is in the hands of a different set of rulers, I won't say, but quote unquote, includes politicians, students and technocrats. Bangladeshis are daring to imagine what the future looks like or may look like. Now again we have to make some guesses about the quota system gone, meritocracy brought back, so we can hope, if not today, not tomorrow, day after, Bangladesh will have people at the top on the basis of their own merit and not because of their connections. Do you see it coming, Dr. Khan?
Well, quota system, or in other words what we call here as affirmative action, is always a double-edged sword.
Yep.
And especially in our part, in South Asia, where it can have the effect of creating animosities between different groups, political constituents who see that the other group is benefiting at their expense, which is what happened in Bangladesh, and as you rightly summarized, that was the catalyst that led to the ouster. It's a very difficult question, but of course the interim government has to really put their acts and thoughts together as to what the future course should be about the quota. By definition, there is, I mean, it's an unwritten rule that people who have been traditionally disadvantaged or people who have given their life or their career to certain aspects, they should be in some way compensated. So it's a noble kind of thought at the heart of it, but if it is misused, then it can boomerang, which is what happened in this particular case. So I think that, or I hope that the interim government takes the correct steps, maybe identify people who really need those kind of push up by the government, so that the divide between the rich and the poor is decreased, and not use it to compensate their political supporters. And then that is the path that we don't want to go down, and hopefully the interim government will see through this and have a more judicious approach to this particular issue. Otherwise it can be a very difficult problem to deal with.
Do you have a similar system in India?
Well, yes, there are quotas in India as well, and it is not something which is very easy to implement. It always has friction between different layers of the society, and India is a tremendously diverse country. There are minorities of all kinds. There are religious minorities, language minorities. There are people in certain parts who have been traditionally disadvantaged. So it's very difficult to put that into action, but of course there is sort of reservations in India for people who have been at the bottom of the society for a very long time. So as I said, it is at the heart of it a very noble thing to put it in place, but the implementation of it is far more trickier. So yes, India also has its share of problems as far as reservations and quota systems go, but the key is to put it in practice in a very judicious and apolitical way.
I asked that question because if there is something to learn from India on this aspect, one should welcome that.
Yes, as I said, perhaps, of course, there have been conflicts and violence because of this reservation policy, but by and large, as I said, the philosophy of quota system and affirmative action is that you want to help the disadvantaged come up the social and economic ladder.
Otherwise, they will always remain disadvantaged.
Yes, absolutely.
And the society will not develop.
Yes, absolutely, of course. You cannot have a huge divide between a society, because that is also a perfect recipe for disaster in the society, for tensions in the in the country and the economy.
And protestations.
And that's what as Sheikh Hasina found to her disadvantage, that it just went out of hand. Yes, absolutely.
The situation today is in a way similar to 1971. Then the power was in the hands of Pakistan. Now, call it whatever, now in the hands of a party that was pivotal to achieve independence. Awami League. A democratic party had turned autocratic. 15, 16 years of total control of the country. It had led to a lot of misunderstanding, misrule, and at the helm was one particular person, the leader of the Awami League. Today the question is, how did the students get there? As my panelists, other panelists said, that it had been brewing up. The dissatisfaction was there. But how did the students get there? Why were the students so angry? Because students were still students. They were still not looking for jobs. See, they're still students. They're not out in the job market. And so organized. It was not an ordinary thing. You see, they were not just in Dhaka, one particular area, one particular university, but all over the country. They were so organized. And what is next for them? Any ideas?
Well, I see the young generation more entrepreneurial. That's why they selected Dr. Yunus to sort of be a major advisor. It's not like they want to sort of go for jobs with the standard 9 to 5 graduate scheme as such. Bangladesh youths have a lot of potential, and that's probably why there is a high unemployment graduate. And they say, well, if we wanted to start our own entrepreneurial businesses, we need to have access to monetary funds. And that's where the nepotism was rising within the banks, where they didn't have access to any funds, or whether you had to pay a bribe to an official. And this is what is important to alleviate, to eliminate this process. I mean, say if it's in the UK, a group of students would come up with a business plan. You go to the bank manager and say, okay, what are you thinking of opening? Have you done a projection? Where do you sit with a 5-year strategy plan? And that's how you would secure funds and have collateral. I mean, looking at the Daily Star News, I was looking at that 10 banks are going into liquidation because there's no capital liquidity within the banks, because these banks have siphoned off funds where overseas or where there's been a lot of corruption. So where are the funds available now for if students want to open a small business? So going forward, I think there needs to, as I said, there needs to be transparency and accountability and understanding of this current generation of what they want to see themselves in the future.
Right, but these are more students, younger students. I mean, they have joined the interim committee or advisory group. 2 of them are there, see. They're still students, you see. Do you think they are mature enough to contribute their ideas to at that level?
I think, yes, obviously. I mean, today's, if you look at the UK, there's a lot of 25-year-olds that have expiring ideas. They sort of do a lot of research into these processes. They come up with plans. They're much more entrepreneurial and understanding.
But we have a different system of education.
Well, we have this is where I was hearing that they need to reform the education system in Bangladesh, which I'm not aware fully how it functions compared to the UK. But it's more like here in Bangladesh, it's more like rote learning, like a parrot, where there's not proper implementation. So you need to understand what the education system is compared to Bangladesh and UK. What's the syllabus in different subjects? What do the students want? That's the key question, because these are the people who led the revolution and brought down the current existing party. So I mean, if you're saying that not mature, a 23-year-old is perfectly capable of saying what they want to achieve themselves in 5 years' time.
Yeah, but on a grander scale. I'm not talking about just his own life,
No.
but on a grander scale, what is good for the country, what is bad for the country, and what it will be in 5 years' time when these policies are implemented. See, this kind of foresight, whether they have it or not.
But that is the reason why they have got Yunus. Exactly. They are not, the student leaders are not ruling the country.
Right.
They are just part of the big setup. And as our fellow panelist was saying, that young people can be articulate. And in some ways we can say that it was their articulation of what they want, which is what translated into Hasina leaving the country. So while they became the agent, it's not that only the students wanted her to go. There were all the other stakeholders behind them who perhaps thought that it was time that Hasina should go. But it's the students who put that into action by hitting the streets, by taking out demonstrations and stirring up things. So it's only natural that they find a reflection in the interim setup. But of course, it's not that they are heading, but they will just put out their policies perhaps, and they will have their inputs shared with the interim government.
So their opinions will be useful.
Yes, definitely. And you cannot not take such an important section on board, especially if they are seen to have played an important role in this particular regime change. So it's only natural that they find some sort of voice in the interim government as to how things should be taken forward from here. And students, of course, as very rightly pointed out, they were not very happy with the way the banks and the financial institutions were functioning. They may not be looking for jobs now, but a year or two later, they will hit the job market. And perhaps they saw this desperation among the student community of the problems of corruption and inefficiency that was eating away at the country's resources. And that's why they came out on the street. So you have to take that important constituent on board, I guess.
Right. The students' unrest, the students not satisfied with the system, lack of job opportunities, lack of investment opportunities, business opportunities. They were not being granted bank loans or overdrafts or funds for starting a business, because it was all controlled by the bigwigs.
Exactly.
And there was a general culture of borrowing from the bank but never returning the money.
So bad debts were going on.
So bad debts were piling up, and that money that was borrowed from this bank or that bank, and several banks, as you pointed out, went bankrupt and were closed down, and the money went abroad. So the money went abroad, and as initially we talked about it, how to get the money back. See, that is one thing, but this is one of the things that the interim advisory committee, interim government will have to handle. Otherwise, the money gone abroad will remain abroad.
Exactly.
And over the course of maybe 5 years, 10 years, those involved, those who have been responsible for this, will probably come out again in the changed circumstances, and then they will start doing the same thing that they have been doing. See, unless they are punished and the money has been brought back to where it belongs. This is one of the things that I fear that has to be done before it's too late.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, they should start looking at forensic accounting to see where the money has been siphoned off, where the initial trail of the funds are, money laundering systems, financial crime. These are actually important issues now currently in the worldwide, because we're not only talking about Bangladesh, in foreign countries where there has been other forms of corruption, of illegal money. So they would have to sort of acquire the expertise of us experts of how to sort of retrieve this money, which is, I think, they are capable of doing so, using the right resources and streams.
And I think that can be a good plank as well for the interim government. If they drum up that they are trying to get the funds back, and if they actually show some results, then it will of course augur well for Bangladesh and for the interim government.
Because we have like a Prudential Regulation Authority, I don't know what the equivalent is in Bangladesh, if they can implement a similar ethical process of how the UK government works in that way. You've got the Bank of England, you've got the Financial Conduct Authority, also you've got the Financial Ombudsman, where as an individual, if you have a case against a particular bank, you could go to the Financial Ombudsman, put your case forward, and they would try to see what the bank, so there's accountability. As such a committee should be set up in Bangladesh, I think, as well, where transparency, governance and accountability is the three key things. And all this, I think, would alleviate, corruption at a very high level. So I think there is future. If there's, as long as you can implement the right processes.
You can see some silver lining.
Yes.
Behind the dark clouds.
Yeah.
To give the, let's say, quote unquote, devil its due, under the leadership of Sheikh Hasina, Bangladesh did make significant economic progress, they say. 7.2% GDP growth in 2022. But this primarily benefited the wealthiest. 10% of the population who controlled over 40% of the total income of the country. So it wasn't a very good sight because 10% of the population were controlling 40% of the business. As growing economy, Bangladesh became a kind of a state that has resources and a strength, and included technologies, surveillance, lethal force, and other forms of persecution. Economic achievement, yes, but technology was used to control the masses. You know, they had this digital law, something that would snoop on everybody's phone, social media, your internet, your emails, everything, see, and nobody was safe. There'll be knock in the small hours of the morning, and people will be picked up. And a lot of people disappeared. Journalists disappeared, if you remember the Rooney Chagwar.
Yes.
And I had the opportunity of interviewing the director of Human Rights Commission of Bangladesh. It's a local organization. And I asked him that what happened to these so many, you know, this case has gone to the court, and a new date, a new date, a new date. So 1,600 new dates have come up. This pair journalists were killed in their own flat. By whom? Nobody knows. That was about maybe 10 years, maybe 12 years ago. This, he said, these are the words of the Director of Human Rights Commission. All the investigations lead up to a very powerful door, and nobody can go beyond that. So all this does not present a very nice picture of the situation of human rights within the country.
Yeah, you're correct, and that's why the students also demanded that the Chief Justice should resign as well.
Yes.
So the problem was
they preempted because he was going to declare
perhaps come up with something. Exactly. So they wanted to strike at the entire ecosystem. It was not just the political elites, but they realized, as you eloquently pointed out, that there was a problem within the judiciary setup. In a normal situation, if people are disappearing, there are killings happening, the judiciary holds the political machinery accountable, right? They have to hold them accountable and pass necessary orders. But if that system was also not present, then the political machinery has a free hand at doing things. And I think that's what the students realized, that we need a complete shake-up of things, which is what has happened. And hopefully, I mean, there was the case also of a British barrister who was in Bangladesh for 8 years. Nobody knew where he was. And now that he's come back, so yeah, very sad incident.
It is very sad. It's very sad for the country. And we went 2 steps forward, and now we have taken 3 steps back. See, so the development has to, we have to restart again. See, and the human resources that has been destroyed. With nobody knows. 2,000 persons died, 1,500 persons died. Nobody knows. And the kind of atrocities that were committed and being committed. We have heard of things in very oppressive regimes, having a black hole and having a Shish Mahal, the Aina Ghar, that was called. See, and people were tortured, and people were sent to that place for 8 years, 10 years. And they didn't know. A gentleman came out only to learn that his wife got married. His mother died, see, because they thought that, they presumed he is dead. So this kind of torture, this kind of punishment, quote unquote, to innocent, again quote unquote, citizens was pathetic, as well as it brought bad name to Bangladesh. Because so far, I mean, since our childhood, we have known that Bangladesh is not a tortuous country. Bangladesh people are very nice, very decent, very polite, and they will give away their own bed, they will give away their own food to any guest. And whatever has happened, we hope that we have seen the last of it, and the country will progress, hopefully, and will achieve miracles that it is destined to, inshallah.
Inshallah.
Any last words?
Well, I was just very struck by the images of the statues of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman being in some ways attacked, and that has besmirched the his legacy, because no one can deny that he is the founding father of Bangladesh.
Yeah.
He did sacrifice, and it's sad to see his legacy being besmirched. His sacrifices have now kind of turned on to themselves because of the way Sheikh Hasina ran her regime, that people are now even thinking and doing things which was unthinkable.
True.
So I think that's a very sad aspect, because in 1971 was a huge landmark global event where the whole world saw how a new country was established, and now not very far off, not very long after that, the legacy of the founding father seems to be not in good hands.
Now tell me about India. How long do you think India can sustain the presence of Sheikh Hasina?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. We all know that that Sheikh Hasina has good relations with India, always had good relations. But I must also remind you, sir, that in 2009, when the current regime was not in power, led by Narendra Modi, and when she faced troubles with the Bangladesh Rifles, she called up Pranab Mukherjee, the senior leader of the Congress party. So what I'm trying to say is that India, Bangladesh are very geographically bound. It's also natural that relationships should be good between countries that are so close. So things moved in that particular direction. But of course, Sheikh Hasina is no longer in power, and India kind of gave that friendship hand. How long she stays, well, that's a billion-dollar question, but much depends on how much pressure the current government puts and what they want from India, and then things will go further from there.
Right. Any last words?
I feel very optimistic. As I said, you need to have a vision, a goal, a strategy, know how to implement it, and the three things is accountability, transparency, governance, and you will be able to achieve it. It would take a long process. It's not going to be an overnight thing, but having the individuals within the academic.
Thank you very much. Thank you, my viewers, for being with us, and we hope that we have been able to unravel some of the secrets of this revolution.